Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Awesome. So I was just told, in fact, I was promised that if I came today to share a little bit about the work that we do, that I could ask questions and that you'd actually respond. So let's actually test this right off the bat. I know it's a little early. If you're like me, you're just kind of getting into things. I see some people kind of already blinking a lot. So we'll wake everybody. Maybe there's someone in here who's already wide awake and can answer this question for me. What does it mean to have a purpose in life? So when you hear that, if I were to describe somebody and say they have a sense of purpose, what do you think that means? Whether you know the whole answer or not, can you get us started? Can anybody in here get us started with what you think it means? What do you think that suggests that someone has a sense of purpose in life? Sorry. A goal that they're striving to achieve is what the response is. So I was told I could ask questions, but I was not told that we would hit the nail on the head the first time. That's perfect. So let's hold that thought. It's a goal that we're striving to achieve. Let's stick with that for 1 second. In fact, let me roll the dice and do the unthinkable and ask a second question, which is there anyone in here who has a sense of purpose? Or you think you have a sense of purpose that you'd be willing to share? I saw a hand go up right away. So yeah, please, what is your sense of purpose? Can you say it again? Want to be a doctor. Okay, so there's a goal we're trying to achieve is what it means to have a purpose. And then so an example of one is somebody says they're trying to become a doctor. So now we have an example here. Thank you both for those who responded here. As it turns out, the work that my colleagues and I do suggests that what we just did in here by taking just a minute to reflect on our purpose in life and to share it or express it in some way seems to matter in measurable ways. That it seems to make a difference, and sometimes even a profound difference, if you take that opportunity and you reflect on your purpose versus if you don't do it because you don't have a purpose or you don't have very many opportunities to reflect on it. It seems to matter. And I want to spend just a few minutes with you today sharing why we think it matters and in a few ways we think it actually matters in people's lives that they have a purpose. We're not quite sure that people would actually give a definition, but here's a working definition that I brought with me that I thought we could share just so we're all on the same page here. And you'll see that the example that we heard, striving towards something, is actually maybe in this idea. We start with a working definition of purpose, which is a stable intention to accomplish something that's both meaningful to you and beneficial to you and to the world around you. Right? So it's a prospective thing. There's something out there you're trying to accomplish, and that as you're trying to do that, there's a benefit that you receive from doing that, and the people around you, whether your friends, your family, or a broader community, are benefiting from that search and that pursuit as well. That's kind of what we think about what purpose is. But if that's how we define purpose, how do you actually go about measuring this? Is an interesting question. I will concede that talking about purpose quickly becomes very philosophical and ethereal. It's up in the clouds. What it means to have a purpose probably means as many different things as there are people sitting in this room, right? We admit that. But if there is something in the clouds, we should be able to measure it, right? And so one way we can measure it is to do what we just did. I could ask you, what is your purpose? Some people will answer right away. Some people won't because they don't have one. You might think, well, those are the people who have purpose and those are people who don't because they can or they cannot answer the question. We could also take a few words from our definition and put together a survey or a scale and try to measure purpose. How much do you feel that you have an intention where somebody raised their hand right away? Some people maybe didn't. They don't know what their purpose in life is. And so we could say people who score high on this scale or higher on this measure feel they have a sense of purpose. People who score lower feel like they don't have one. Right? So there's a lot of different ways we could think about measuring purpose. But I want to share with you where this whole kind of interest started for me. Right? When I first picked up my first paper, it wasn't that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, picked up my first paper to read about what purpose in life really is to researchers. I was shocked that they didn't have a lot of sophisticated scales and measures in there. They did something kind of different. What they did is they were looking at attractiveness. And we can go through this kind of an example like this. Here's a picture of Ryan Gosling. There's a lot of people in this room. I see some smiles. There's a lot of people in this room who might think this guy's really attractive, right? We all, okay, or maybe not. Not everybody. There's individual differences, but a lot of us agree that he's an attractive, handsome person, right? A lot of us might also agree that this person is really attractive. I think they're actually partners in real life. Yeah, exactly, whistling. Eva Mendes, very attractive person, right? And as it turns out in this paper, it doesn't really matter if it's a celebrity or not. It can be anybody who we just generally agree, collectively think is an attractive person. So take somebody local who we all kind of agree is very attractive. This guy, just for example. Just an example. Yeah, okay, the biggest applause was for this guy, right? He works in this department, right? We all, just for example, think he's attractive or even extremely attractive. It's up to you to what you decide. As it turns out, people we think are attractive tend to score high on measures of purpose in life. And really, when we unpack that a little bit, what this really means is that it's hidden to us. We don't know Ryan Gosling's purpose score. You don't know how much purpose in life I have. But people who score high on measures of purpose, people who feel like their life has a purpose, they know what they want to do, tend to appear to us as more attractive. They have more interpersonal appeal. We want to get to know them. We want to be their friends. We want to have conversations with them. So what this did for me is suggest that there's something about purpose in life that's like an aura, right? Whether or not you can measure it, we can measure it by just interacting with people, and we can kind of discern that there's something about that person, right? And as it delved further in the literature, it wasn't just as magical as it being attractive. It even showed up in the health literature. I'll throw all these up since I don't have the working clicker today. But when you look at the health psychology literature, right? Whether it's health outcomes, physical or physiological health outcomes, wherever you look, one of the most interesting things I can suggest to you is about every month or every other month, there's a new study that comes out that says that people who feel like they have a strong sense of purpose in life, they tend to fare better than the rest of us, right? So people with a strong sense of purpose tend to recover faster from surgery, right? They tend to have fewer skipped heartbeats over the course of a day. People who have an arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat, if they have a sense of purpose, they skip fewer beats over the course of a day. They have lower levels of cognitive decline as they age, lower risk for stroke, fewer psychosomatic symptoms. So people with a sense of purpose don't feel as many headaches or stomach aches as the rest of us, or even those who are receiving treatment. So for cancer treatment, chemotherapy, those individuals with a sense of purpose say they report fewer negative consequences of those treatments, right? So they seem to be in some ways kind of superhuman, if you will. They're not, but they seem to report sort of being able to stave off some of the things that take the rest of us out. They seem to be able to withstand a little bit more. Perhaps the most compelling thing I can tell you about purpose is that it is associated with longevity. People who score highest on measures of purpose in life, they really feel like their life is purposeful, they tend to live longer than the rest of us. Right? So for me, that's probably the most compelling and interesting thing. And what we spend some of our time in my research laboratory doing is trying to understand why that is. Right? There's a relationship. People with purpose tend to live longer. But what is the functional explanation? What accounts for that relationship between those two things? And we're trying to unpack that. And we have, to this date, we have sort of a working hypothesis. What we think might be going on is that people with a sense of purpose can confront and they construe stressors in very different ways. So things that would otherwise hurt us or bother us, people with a sense of purpose have the ability to withstand, or they approach it and they navigate it in different ways. And so I want to give you an example, just sort of a working example of one study we've done to sort of test this is how do purposeful people respond in stressful situations? Here's a stressful situation. It's a map of our country. Right? And what you see on this map is every county in our country is listed. And every county is color-coded by its percent increase in ethnic minority populations in the past census recordings from 2000 to 2010 census. So the darker the blue, the larger the increase of ethnic minorities in those counties. Essentially, we are living in a society that is increasingly ethnically diverse. Right? As we go forward, our chances are only increasing of working next to, living next to, and going to school with people who are ethnically different than us. Right? And this is a social value. I just heard it in the video, right? That we need to be learning from and learning around people who are different from us. A diversity of perspective is important. Businesses, companies, schools value diversity. But what's really interesting about that is a paradox. At the social level, we like diversity, we champion it. But at the individual level, sometimes it makes us uncomfortable. And it's not a story just about race or ethnicity. When we're around any type of difference, people who have a different ethnic background, different ages, different religious background, people who make a lot more, a lot less money than us, when we're around them, we don't feel as comfortable as we do when we're around people who we think are similar to us. Right? When we perceive differences, it's harder for us to feel like we connect. I don't know if you have the same values. I don't know if you're speaking the same language. Right? If I feel like we're the same, I feel like I have the currency to interact with you. If I feel that you're different, it makes it a little bit difficult. I might start to withdraw a little bit. I don't know how to reach out to you, right? That's a problem. If that's true, that's a problem as we become a more diverse country. But it also seems like this might be the exact environment in which purpose could be beneficial. If you feel like you can't make meaningful connections to people around you, maybe a sense of purpose. Remember, an intention to go out and do something that has benefit to you and the world around you. Maybe it gets you thinking about how you actually have connections to people around you. So a test, a hypothesis we can formulate is, what role might purpose play when people are in diverse environments? And does purpose actually protect people from the ill consequences of being in diverse environments? Now, we're up here in New York. We could put people in Tompkins County and have them walk to all of these counties and see what happens. We needed a little bit more manageable way of exposing people to diversity, so we did this. I'm going to share with you the results and sort of the pattern of the methodology here for an experiment that we did a while back. What we did is we invited a group of college students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds to participate in a study. And the study had two parts. The first part was an experimental manipulation. In this experiment, people were assigned at random to one of two conditions. The first condition, we asked them to do what we just did at the beginning of this conversation, to think about, what does it mean to have purpose? What is your purpose? Where does that come from? So half of our participants were writing for no more than 10 minutes about their sense of purpose in life and what it might mean to have a sense of purpose. The other half of the participants were assigned at random to a control topic to write about the last movie they saw. Right? So for 10 minutes, they unpacked what was the plot, who were the characters, what was it about, what did you think about the movie. Right? So one group is thinking, engaging with purpose, and what that might mean. The other group is writing about the last movie that they saw. Right? And then after this, we walked them across campus. This study took place in Chicago, and on this campus in Chicago, the subway runs right through campus. So we put people on the subway and had them ride from campus, the North Campus, to the downtown campus. 14 stops across the Chicago Red Line. And every stop along the way, we asked them to do something pretty simple. Tell us how you feel. Right? They didn't know the whole nature of the study. We just said, we're interested in how people feel as they ride trains. Right? So they reported a lot of different moods that they felt. So scared, alone, distressed, nervous. And we also asked positive moods as well, happy, content, excited, as they rode the train. But what they didn't know, what our participants didn't know, is that we had experimenters on board keeping track of the ethnic composition of the train. So for every time we took a measurement, there were two experimenters keeping track of who was on board. To give you an example of what we did here, it looked like this. So experimenters were standing on both ends of the train, who the participants didn't know. But they were keeping track of on an experimental form that looks like the one at the top here. So we were keeping track of the number of white men, white women, black men, black women, Asian or Asian American men and women, Latino men and women, so on and so forth. Every stop. Right? So what we could do, because we knew our participants' race or ethnic background, we could calculate each measurement. What percentage of this train looks like you? What percentage of the train looks different than you? For each person, for each measurement, right, that we took. Right? And one thing you need to know is that for the average person, across this train ride, regardless of their race or ethnic background, for the average person, when the train looked more diverse, when the train looked less like you, your levels of distress or negative mood increased. When the train started to look more like you at a given stop, more people came on that were of your racial or ethnic background, you felt more comfortable. Right? So ethnic diversity, consistent with what we expected, was a little bit uncomfortable for people. And when the train looked more similar, people felt more comfortable. But the trick was this. Here's the punchline. Right? And here's some data. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, so let's walk through this together. What we were measuring, of course, is negative affect, or levels of distress, things like being scared, distressed, nervous, alone, so on and so forth. Higher scores on the y-axis here mean greater levels of distress. And the two different bars you see are two different writing conditions. Remember, this was an experiment that we ran, and people either wrote about the last movie they saw or they wrote about purpose. The bar on the top there are people who wrote about the last movie they saw. And if you look at the pattern, what it looks like is that people who wrote about the last movie they saw, when they were on a train with a lot of people who looked like them, their level of distress was lower than when they were riding a train with people who looked a lot less like them. Right? There's more diversity on board compared to what their ethnic background was. It was people who wrote about purpose that showed a relative statistical flatline. And through our analysis, what we discerned here was that purpose was protective. If people wrote about purpose for no more than 10 minutes before riding on this train, they were relatively intact in terms of their levels of distress. It didn't matter the ethnic composition of the train. They felt how they wanted to feel throughout the train ride. People who wrote about the last movie or our control topic, they were the ones who seemed vulnerable to the composition around them, right? So for us, this could explain over time. This is a simple 40-minute train ride from North Chicago towards downtown. And it could explain why over time, people who don't have the protection of purpose may be showing these sort of undulations and these sort of variations in their mood over time in ways you don't want to be distressed simply because of who's coming in and off the train. And I'll simply close by sharing a couple of final thoughts with you of the kinds of questions we're asking based upon this pattern of results that we found. For us, this really is not a story about race. It's an interesting context. We think it's a meaningful context to ask these questions in, but it doesn't stop there. For us, it's a question about stress. Under what situations do people experience stress, and what role might purpose play? So we want to ask these in different ways. I didn't have time to show you today. I didn't think I'd have time, but we just finished a set of experiments out here on the slope, on Cornell's big slope, where a lot of students, I teach a course, and students would come up and said, this couldn't make it to class because the slope was too big. Right? The slope, climbing up the hill was too much for them to get to class. We gave them the same type of experimental manipulation. At the bottom of the hill, we said, please write for a few minutes about purpose, and in fact, they only wrote a sentence or two about their sense of purpose in life, or they wrote about a control topic. The people who wrote, across 4 experiments, the people who wrote about their sense of purpose before climbing in the hill found the hill less daunting. They thought it took less effort, and they estimated the slope is less steep than people who wrote about a control topic who saw the hill as more daunting. Right? So it may have implications for all kinds of stressors that we encounter, but thinking through where else can we ask these questions is an important next step for us. And finally, a next set of questions for us asks, how can purpose arise in the context of everyday life? It's one thing to bring people to a laboratory and say, hey, for 10 minutes, please write about your purpose or write about the last movie you saw. But that's not an everyday experience. We can't bring people to our lab every day of their life, right? So where does purpose naturally occur? Why did somebody raise their hand before I even finished the question? Something about this environment primed them and they were already thinking about their purpose, whereas other people maybe not. How can we bottle that? And if purpose is a good thing, how can we bottle it so other people can access it and reap the benefits as well? I think that's about my time, so I'll close and simply say thank you for your time. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take a few. Okay, great, perfect. Oh, thank you.